The screen fades in on grainy black and white footage, ticker tapes fluttering like confetti, men in fedoras cheering on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Laughter, horns honking, pure electric hope. Then, cut to silence, a single phone ringing, a broker's voice cracking, prices flashing downward so fast the board can't keep up. October 1929. America wasn't just riding high, it thought it had invented permanent prosperity. In one brutal week, that illusion died. Stocks lost nearly 90% of their value by 1932. Factories went dark. 1 in 4 workers lost their job. Thousands of banks simply vanished. And for the next decade, the world's richest nation couldn't figure out how to feed itself. But here's the uncomfortable truth they rarely say out loud. The crash didn't cause the Great Depression. It was the moment the mask slipped. The real sickness had been growing for years in plain sight, inside a financial system built on borrowed money, blind optimism, and rules that only worked when everyone kept smiling. And right now, with U.S. government debt pushing $39 trillion, sky-high stock valuations, and fresh memories of bubbles that popped overnight, that same sickness is whispering again. So let's walk through exactly how it happened, step by step. No jargon, no lectures, just the story of how confidence turned into catastrophe. The 1920s felt like magic. World War I was over. American factories that once built tanks now built Model T Fords and toasters and radios. Wages rose, cities lit up at night. People bought their first car, their first home, their first electric icebox, often on the brand new installment plan. Pay a little now, worry about the rest later. It seemed harmless, smart even. Wall Street turned into the national casino. A stock certificate meant you owned a sliver of a company, but most people weren't buying slivers of companies. They were buying the idea that prices would keep rising forever. Brokers let you borrow 90% of the purchase price. $10 of your own money bought a $100 share. They called it buying on margin. It felt like free leverage until the price dropped even a little. Then you owed money you didn't have, and the broker sold your shares whether you liked it or not. A house of cards with real people living inside. By September 1929, the market had climbed 500% in 6 years. Janitors and secretaries were day trading between shifts. Economists on the radio declared a new era. No one wanted to hear that farmers were already drowning in debt, that factories were overproducing, or that the whole boom rested on people spending money they hadn't earned yet. Then the music stopped. Black Thursday, October 24th, 13 million shares traded in panic. Bankers pooled millions to buy stocks and steady the market. It worked for 5 days. Black Tuesday, October 29th, 16 million shares dumped. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, the heartbeat of American business, would eventually fall from 381 to 41. Billions, trillions in today's dollars evaporated. Most Americans never owned stocks, but their banks did, and the people who had borrowed on margin couldn't repay. Suddenly, banks looked shaky, so ordinary families did the only logical thing. They ran to withdraw their savings, all at once. Here's the hidden mechanic almost nobody understood at the time. Banks never keep all your money in the vault. They keep a fraction and lend the rest out. It's how the system creates new money and keeps the economy breathing. When everyone demands cash on the same day, the bank can't pay. It fails. Between 1930 and 1933, roughly 9,000 banks collapsed, about 1 in every 2. No deposit insurance, no safety net. If your bank died, your life savings died with it. The dominoes didn't stop falling. Businesses that relied on bank loans couldn't borrow anymore. They laid off workers. Laid off workers stopped buying cars and clothes and radios. Factories cut production even further. Prices started dropping, not just a little, but 25 to 33% across the economy. Deflation sounds nice at the grocery store until you realize your paycheck is shrinking too, while the mortgage you took out in 1928 stays the exact same size. Debt becomes heavier every single month. Farmers who owed money on their land watched crop prices collapse and still had to pay the bank the full amount. Many simply walked away. By 1933, unemployment hit 25%. Real GDP had fallen 30%. Industrial production was down almost half. Shantytowns called Hooverville sprang up under bridges. Bread lines stretched for blocks. In the Midwest, the Dust Bowl turned fertile farmland into sandstorms that buried entire towns. Families piled into jalopies and headed west with everything they owned strapped to the roof, only to find California already full. The government's first instinct made everything worse. President Hoover believed in balanced budgets and self-reliance. He cut spending. The Federal Reserve, instead of flooding the system with money, actually tightened it. They were terrified of inflation. They got deflation so brutal it froze the economy solid. Trade collapsed when Congress passed the Smoot-Hawley tariff, sparking a global trade war. The gold standard, meant to keep nations honest, trapped countries into destructive policies they couldn't escape. It took a different kind of president and a different kind of crisis to break the cycle. Franklin Roosevelt promised a New Deal. He closed every bank for a week, inspected them, and only reopened the healthy ones. He created the FDIC so depositors would never lose their savings again, the SEC to watch Wall Street. The WPA and CCC put millions to work building roads, bridges, parks, post offices, Social Security, unemployment insurance, farm subsidies. Some programs worked, some wasted money, but they put cash back into people's pockets, and more importantly, they put hope back into the conversation. Even then, the Depression truly didn't end until World War II. Factories that had been idle roared back to life, making tanks and planes. Unemployment vanished almost overnight. The lesson was brutal. Sometimes only a global catastrophe can force an economy to spend at the scale needed to recover. So what does any of this mean in 2026? We have guardrails now, deposit insurance, a more active Federal Reserve, automatic stabilizers. A repeat of the exact same 1930s script is unlikely, but the ingredients that made the system fragile haven't disappeared. They've just changed shape. Sky-high public debt, asset prices that assume endless growth, a financial system still built on leverage and confidence. Policymakers who, like their 1929 counterparts, are often fighting the last war instead of the next one. The Great Depression proved something simple and terrifying. Economies don't collapse because one thing goes wrong. They collapse when dozens of things that seemed reasonable in good times suddenly become disastrous together. When confidence evaporates, the math doesn't care how optimistic you were yesterday. The question we're left with isn't whether another shock is coming. Shocks always come. The question is whether the next one will find us with the same blind spots our grandparents had, convinced that this time the rules are different, the boom is permanent, and the house of cards will never, ever fall.